What if a new global pandemic returned like the one in 2020? This would be the second lockdown. The first case went unnoticed. A young man in Istanbul felt a slight dizziness on the subway, then fainted without explanation. His recovery was quick, but when he woke up, something in his gaze seemed different. The doctors dismissed it as unimportant. Hours later, in Sao Paulo, a woman collapsed in the middle of a crowded market. Within a week, hospitals in Tokyo, New York, and Johannesburg were reporting the same pattern: sudden fainting spells, intense fever, temporary loss of consciousness, and then an almost miraculous recovery. At first, the medical community believed it was just a simple viral infection. There were no signs of permanent damage in the patients, nor symptoms suggesting a deadly risk. But when laboratory tests began to show anomalies in blood samples, uncertainty turned into alarm. The people who had experienced the fainting spell displayed an altered biological pattern. Their DNA showed a slight mutation, as if something inside them had changed at a cellular level. In the following days, cases multiplied. Authorities tried to calm the population, insisting that the affected individuals recovered without apparent aftereffects. But then, the most unsettling reports began to emerge. Survivors of the virus described a strange feeling of detachment, as if something in their perception of the world had shifted. Some claimed to feel an inexplicable connection with other infected individuals, able to anticipate their thoughts or emotions. In several cities, groups of patients began gathering spontaneously, without knowing each other beforehand, drawn together by an instinct they themselves couldn't explain. At first, governments did not react. This wasn't like the 2020 pandemic. There were no collapsing lungs, no overwhelmed ICUs. There were no images of overcrowded hospitals or doctors on the verge of collapse. On the surface, it didn't seem like a real threat. Yes, people were getting sick, but they recovered. There were no deaths, no healthcare crisis. However, scientists began to notice something deeply unsettling. Those who had fallen ill came back changed, though in ways almost imperceptible at first. It wasn't something as obvious as a shift in their voice or the way they walked. It was more subtle, more disturbing. They were quieter, more distant. Their families noticed it first: small changes in their habits, silences where there had once been words, a slight delay in their responses. Something in their expressions, in their way of speaking, in the way they looked at others. Something was different, but no one could quite explain why. Reports began piling up, flooding the desks of psychiatrists and neurologists worldwide. People who, after recovering, forgot small details of their lives. These weren't cases of deep amnesia or evident brain damage, but something in their memories was fading away. A man in Madrid couldn't remember his dog's name, even though it slept beside him every night. A mother in New York looked at her 5-year-old son and, for a moment, couldn't recall the sound of his laughter. In Tokyo, a programmer forgot how to write in the coding language she had mastered all her life. One of the most alarming cases occurred in Vienna. A young violinist, a prodigy since childhood, woke up unable to play a single note. She knew what a violin was. She knew how music was supposed to sound. But when she tried to move her fingers over the strings, her mind went blank, as if the part of her that held the music had been erased. Doctors tried to find a logical explanation. Brain scans, neurotransmitter analyses, genetic studies, but everything appeared normal. There was no neural damage, no signs of trauma. They were simply no longer whole. Something, somewhere inside them, had vanished without a trace. Theories began multiplying. Was the virus a way of rewriting human memory? Was it selectively erasing specific memories with an unknown purpose? Some suggested it wasn't forgetting but replacement, that something else was occupying the space those memories had left behind. Fear grew when recovered individuals started gathering in silence. In parks, in plazas, in train stations. Sometimes, they would simply stand there, looking at one another, as if they were waiting for something. As if they knew something the rest of the world had yet to understand. And then, someone finally voiced the fear that many had been too afraid to say aloud. I don't think they're the same anymore. Not entirely. Neurologists were the first to sound the alarm. Although brain scans appeared normal at first glance, deeper analyses revealed something disturbing. The disease was altering the structure of certain neural connections, subtly but undeniably reconfiguring the brain. At first, the effects seemed minor, a blurred memory here, a lost skill there. something anyone might attribute to stress or fatigue. But as the infection spread and more people fell ill, it became clear that the phenomenon was not random. It was progressive. Each new infection not only weakened the immune system, but also caused a growing fragmentation of personal identity. Those who became infected a second time displayed far more pronounced symptoms. A man in Paris woke up unable to recognize his wife's face, though he still remembered their anniversary. In Sao Paulo, a literature teacher forgot how to read. In Moscow, a young athlete stared at his own legs in confusion, unable to understand why his body reacted with reflexes he didn't remember training. The worst cases emerged when the disease struck people for a third time. Patients woke up in hospitals unable to recall their own names. Parents looked at their children as if they were complete strangers. In Beijing, a woman walked into the office where she had worked for 15 years and stood motionless before her desk, unable to remember why she was there. The most unsettling part was that, although these patients seemed to have lost their past, their overall functionality remained intact. They were not catatonic, nor did they exhibit signs of severe cognitive damage. They could learn again, they could adapt. But they did so as if they were newborns in adult bodies, as if they were someone else. Neurologists began to wonder whether the disease wasn't just erasing memories but replacing people themselves. Were they still the same individuals after losing their memories? Or was the pandemic creating an entirely new humanity, one without a past, without history, without identity? And if that was the case, what would happen when the last memory disappeared? The WHO declared a global state of emergency, but this time, humanity was slow to react. After the paranoia of 2020, many refused to believe in another pandemic. But when world leaders began showing signs of forgetfulness in public, society spiraled into panic. A European president confused his speech with that of another nation. A famous actor forgot his wife's face during a live broadcast. In the streets, people found themselves disoriented, unable to remember how they had gotten there. Forced lockdowns were imposed. This time, there were no debates, no hesitation. Governments acted with a speed they hadn't even demonstrated in 2020. Borders were shut immediately, flights were canceled without warning, and within hours, cities were deserted. But the disease, nicknamed Nemesis by the scientific community, moved with relentless precision. It didn't spread solely through air or physical contact. It traveled through shared memories. A simple conversation, a recalled moment with someone infected, was enough for the disease to find a new host. No physical contact was needed. You didn't even have to be in the same place. Talking about a past event with an infected person was all it took for the virus to begin its work. It was the first pandemic in history that didn't just affect bodies. It attacked collective memory, slowly eroding the identity of humanity itself. Survivors learned to live in silence. The once bustling streets, filled with conversations and noise, became spaces of absolute quiet. Governments ordered an end to verbal communication and banned the reading of old newspapers, letters, or books, fearing that memories preserved in words could spread the infection. Any attempt to remember the past was a risk, a crack through which the disease could seep in. Humanity was forced into absolute isolation. Television broadcast only silent images. Social media was shut down. Families lived together but never spoke, communicating only through gestures and empty gazes. Schools closed, for teaching history was now a forbidden act. In this new world, speaking too much could mean losing oneself, forgetting who you were, disappearing without a trace in anyone's memory. Over the years, the world changed in ways no one could quite remember. Cities crumbled into ruins, history became a distorted echo, and the very concept of human identity grew hazy. By the time the last outbreak of Nemesis was eradicated, civilization was no longer the same. The few who survived tried to rebuild what had been lost. But as they looked back, they realized that no one could remember exactly what had been lost. They weren't even sure what they had once been. And then came the most terrifying question of all. If one day we completely forget who we were, are we still human?